Hey everybody, we're going to take a look at for loops and we're going to do it with a brand new format here. So got some video going, we'll have a little bit easier time I think seeing the output of the programs, so let me know what you think. For loops are really going to be not that big of a departure from what we've been doing. While loops, we've used all these different ways to get our programs to, anytime we need to repeat something, we've been using a while loop. But a lot of the times we were counting up to a specific number, we were doing something a certain number of times, and so we were always making these int counter variables, which we were, while the counter is less than, 100, and then maybe we had another while loop where, counter 2 is less than, counter the original counter, and we had to keep resetting counter 2 back to 0 or something at the bottom of every loop, something like this. So this was like a really common structure that we saw, especially when we had nested loops where we had a couple of counters. Maybe counter 2 was getting incremented in here and counter was getting incremented out here. And so we had this initialization of the counters, resetting them, changing them, was kind of all scattered around our programs. And it turns out we do that so frequently that we actually want to have a whole special loop just to handle what we call those iterator driven loops. So the for loop looks like this, and it's made up of 3 parts. So you type in for, and then the first part is you declare your counter. It's really common to use like a single letter or something like that. I like to try to use a double letter. So a lot of times you'll see int I, int j, int k when you search on the internet. There's a real benefit when you use double letters, which is it makes it a lot easier to search for with find and replace. And so if you use find and replace, there's not a lot of words that use double I's unless you're a big fan of skiing, or you're making the next skiing video game. So double I's, double J's, they don't show up naturally in words. So if you then do a search for them, they'll show up. You can find them real quick. So the first part is I'm going to declare my counter variable. So here I'm going to start my counter at 0. The next part is just like a while loop. I'm going to show where the terminating condition, so how long is this going to go for? So I'm going to say, well, I'm just going to do a count up to 10. And then the third part is, well, how does our counter change? So in this case, I'm going to say plus plus, right? But I could either say like, hey, maybe we're going to count up by 2's. So I might say II equals II plus 2, right? And so then it would count up 2 every time. So, and then let's just see out II, and we'll, throw in a tab there and call it good. And then if we run it, you can see here we got 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. And that's exactly what we wanted to see because we were counting up by 2's. And just so you can remember, I could replace that with plus equal to, run it, and I get the exact same thing. So remember, we can do plus equals, we can do, hey, let's do times equals 2. What do we get? Ooh, we got an infinite loop. Why did we get an infinite loop? Oh, whoops, because we started at 0. So everything that you're used to seeing, 1, 2, 4, 8, anything you're used to seeing with the while loops, so things like infinite loops, did my terminating condition get met? Changing my counter, all those things are going to be exactly the same as they were when we were working with while loops. We can just have a nice, neat way to introduce them here. So, couple of caveats. So let's just make this the old I++ for simplicity's sake, and we'll go back to starting at 0. So if we run this, you can see that it counts up from 0 to 9. So that's one of the most common things that we'll do. So one of the things that we might want to do is we might want to have a nested loop. So what's the big benefit with for loops with nested loops? So let's say I actually wanted to say, well, int I, let's go JJ equals, well, whatever II is, okay? And then I'm gonna say, while JJ is greater than or equal to 0, I'm gonna keep going, and then I'm gonna say JJ minus minus. This is gonna be like I'm counting up with the i's and I'm counting down with the j's, okay? So this is kind of nice, and instead of this, I'm gonna print out my ii's here, okay? So I'm gonna do my tabs here, and then when I get to the bottom of this loop, I'm gonna end the line. So this should look familiar. I have my nested loop inside here. I've used some indenting to show what is inside of everything else, which is great. And let's run it and see what happens, okay? So I got myself a nice kind of number period going here, right? So I got pyramid. I got 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3. Great, and I got up there and I, did a bunch of nines, and I got 10 nines instead of 9 nines. Oops, I can probably do that by getting rid of that one. And hey, look, I have my number period there. So pyramid. It's not a punctuation mark. Okay, so nice. I made this nice sloping thing. But what are some cool things? Notice that I didn't have to do anything with JJ past this initial line here, right? I told it to count down. And more importantly, this variable JJ only exists inside this for loop, okay? So if I tried to see out JJ right here at the end of the loop, and I run it, I actually get a syntax error, and it says JJ was not declared in the scope. So just like when we declare variables like inside an if statement or a while loop or something like that, as soon as we get to our next curly bracket, they're just not going to exist anymore. So when I close off that loop, JJ doesn't exist. I can't print it out. But II, because it is the sort of parent loop, okay, I can use it inside here as much as I want. So this gives me this cool thing where I can use it changes, and then it can influence the loop in there. So this is going to be something that is going to be really popular for us to do, is that we're going to use an outer loop to set some traits inside the inner loop. So here I could have, I said this is equal to this, or I could have set this equal to 0, and I could have counted up to II. There's lots of different ways to do it. But anyways, really nice and flexible here. I put in SRAN because I was thinking I was going to do random numbers, but I didn't. So don't worry about that. It's not anything related to the for loops. So hopefully that gets you started. And there you go. Cheers.